Negative emotions. Oh, wait. They're emotions. That means they're appropriate, they're meaningful, and they are passing. Yeah, really? Right? Today, I've chosen as my title, The Wave of the Heart. Because we have to deal with this thing called, we're going to talk about the heart as the fulcrum of our higher and lower selves. As you know, the heart is the fourth chakra, and we have the upper chakras, which tend to go up into enlightenment, and we have the lower chakras that tend to be about our human embodied experience in the world. And the heart is the center fulcrum of those two. And you'll notice it's not pink, nor is it generally, the attribute is not generally love, but healing. In the chakra system, the primary attribute of the heart is healing, because it is the fulcrum, the bringing together of these two, we could say the mind and the body, and the wholeness of our being. Now, the problem with it is that we get very caught up when we talk about the heart. We got very caught up in our feelings and emotions. And usually, oftentimes, if we're not paying attention and we're not coming from a spiritually metaphysical place, when we talk about I'm following my heart, I'm going to hear what my heart has to say, what we usually mean is I'm going to wait and see how I feel. I don't feel like going to the gym today. I am mad at you. I don't feel like talking to you. So we can often confuse the things that Reverend Karen has been talking about the last 2 weeks, which have been a very metaphysical understanding of the heart and the intelligence of the heart, with a lot of our popular language about it, which talks a lot about feelings and emotions. So we're going to address this today as the wave of the heart, because don't our feelings and emotions sometimes feel like they crash over us like a wave? But that's also a very useful metaphor to help us understand how to take up our feelings and emotions. Now, if you go to the dictionary, feelings and emotions essentially have exactly the same description. And in the English language, we tend to use these two words interchangeably. Now, except that there are nuances to our feelings and emotions it's really important to understand. So in the Science of Mind, for those of you who have taken Foundations class, those of you who are going to sign up for Foundations class, if you haven't already taken it, in Science of Mind, we have arbitrarily defined feelings and emotions this way. Okay, so not because it's the right definition, but because we're trying to get a hold of two different things. So just bear with me and just pretend that for the time being, this is the way we're going to define these words. First of all, we use the term feeling. Science of Mind uses the term feeling to mean an inner state of reality. And it is a resonance with the quality of God, a quality of spirit. So we're talking about love, joy, harmony, peace, order, beauty, life. These are inner states of experience that we can have, which are the inner state of our I amness. And isn't it true that we can have these experiences outside of what is happening in our human condition? Right? This is an inner state, which is an absolute reality, which is not conditioned upon external events. And when we do our spiritual practices, we do our meditation, we do all of our different spiritual mind treatment, our different spiritual practices, it is to align ourselves with this inner state. So we're going to use feelings to mean that. And so when we say, I feel myself in resonance with spirit, I feel love, it's this, what we call this vertical axis. Now we use the term emotion to mean a continuum of reaction to things that are going on. the human experience. Now, sometimes those are things that are going on out here, whether it's traffic or whether it's, my wife wasn't nice to me this morning, or the boss looked at me funny, or, or an inner. I have a thought, or I read something in the news, or something like that. And it's a human condition, whether it's out there or in here. And it is a continuum of reaction that we have. So happy, sad, joy, despair, love and grief, confidence and fear, right? All this is the continuum of response or reaction that we can have to circumstances, to the human experience. This is beautifully always represented in the cross. And while in the Ankh and the Christian cross, the bottom leg is extended, originally the cross was an equilateral cross, and it means this spiritual reality where the heart is at the center of that cross. So this is what's called the vertical axis, and it is the inner state of reality, which is an absolute state which is not conditioned upon experience. We call this vertical axis the emotions, because this is the continuum of the feeling in response to outer circumstances or events. So let's say, for example, that the absolute quality of joy is an inner state that we can have. So for me, truthfully, when my mother passed away after 2.5 months, in ICU and going into a coma, when she passed away, while I was deeply grieving the loss of my mother, I had such deep joy that I knew that she had moved on to her next expression. She was released from all of that, and I had such a joy that she had been my mother. Right? So despite the grief of the experience, I had this deep sense that has stayed with me ever since she passed away. This extraordinary joy that my mother was a part of my life. Do you see? That's the inner state. And we have on one side joy, and perhaps on the other side despair, when we are on this continuum, when we are reacting to outer circumstances. Now, in the metaphysics, in science of mind, we don't actually believe that there is a force called despair. On this continuum of reaction, what we have is either the full presence of that inner state or its complete absence, or something in between, right? We could parse that continuum, all the way to neutral and then over to the other side, based on how much of that inner state we are actually experiencing in response. So there isn't a force for despair. There's simply the absence, its complete absence, of this reality of joy. So what brings those two in alignment, right? They cross. At the center of the cross is that same center that we saw in our chakra system. It's the heart. The heart is what adjudicates, manages, is what moves us, allows us to move on this continuum and to, well, they call it emotional intelligence, right? From a spiritual point of view, to recognize that we have emotions, but we aren't our emotion, just like we have thoughts and we have a body, but that's not who we are. And it allows us to begin to see them in perhaps a new way. So we're going to talk about that. How do we take this up? So the first thing I want to say is emotions are appropriate, meaningful, and passing. There's nothing wrong with an emotional response or emotional reaction to something. Right? We have joy in holding our child. We have joy in a promotion. We have satisfaction in accomplishment. We feel contentment when we've created something and it works out, right? These are all appropriate responses to this lovely thing called the human world, the human condition. And our responses are meaningful. They mean something. They tell us how important this thing was, or how much we are engaged with it, or how much to savor the moment. The deeper the feeling is, the more we can savor the moment. And this most significant truth about emotions and why we've parsed that out from feeling is that emotions are passing. They come and they go. Just think about falling in love. Yes. Thank you. Right? No, yeah, especially your first love, and way back when, and they were the best things in sliced bread, and you're never going to find anybody like them ever again, and that feeling sort of comes and goes, doesn't it? But right, and so does the sense of accomplishment. Man, I climbed that mountain. Oh, there's another mountain to climb. So the challenge, of course, in our emotions is not to deny them, not to push them away, but also not to cling to them, to savor the moment. One of the fundamental truths about emotions is they are passing. This is why it's called the wave of the heart. They come and they go. The biggest challenge we have with positive emotions is that we seek to cling to them, and we try to squeeze every last drop of good out of it until we become addicted to it. And then, of course, you know what happens with addictions. We need more and more and more and more of it. And it's never, never, never enough. And it's never the same, right? It's never the same. But when we can savor each moment for what it is, feel the joy, feel the love, feel the contentment, really, really celebrate it in the moment, you see, we can let it come and then we can let it go. Why? Because we know it's going to come again. That's what waves do. They come and they go and they come again. So this isn't the only joy we're ever going to feel, or the only love we're ever going to feel, or the only accomplishment we're ever going to feel. And so to really learn to savor the experience like a beautiful sunset, to savor it and not stand there and say, wait, no, don't go. What if the sunset isn't as pretty tomorrow? I'll never have as beautiful a sunset ever again. Right? It's nonsense. And yet this is what we do, especially with our spiritual experiences, right? I've had this fabulous meditation. I had this deep and profound thing. Now I'm constantly trying to get it back again instead of just savoring the moment. So fundamentally, emotions are appropriate, meaningful, and they are passing. I love the Bible quote, it came to pass, it didn't come to stay. Right? But what about these negative emotions? Fear and doubt and anger and grief and all those horrible negative emotions that we don't like and we try to avoid and we don't want to have anything to do with, and we deny and we resist, or we just fall into and we think we're never going to get out of it again. Negative emotions. Oh, wait, they're emotions. That means they're appropriate, they're meaningful, and they are passing. Yeah, really? Right? There are three primary, what we would call negative emotions. They're the three counterbalance to the three positive emotions: anger, grief, and depression. And we either avoid them at all costs, or we project them out onto everybody else because we're not willing to feel them. And yet anger, grief, and depression all are appropriate responses. I grieved when my mother passed. I couldn't call her up anymore and say, hey, my son graduated from firefighter academy. Hey, my son broke his foot, I don't know what to do. Hey, my son, I didn't have that anymore. And so it was appropriate to grieve. Do you see, grief is simply the other side of love. Anger is appropriate. It tells us when our boundaries are being violated or there is an injustice happening. There's a reason why we call it righteous anger. And anger, when it's clean and appropriate, is telling us something important. And depression is the same. When we find ourselves flat and depressed, one of two things. One, could we just take the foot off the accelerator for a little bit? Please, right? Isn't it like just on go all the time in our culture today? Just go. And we have a moment of the desire to just back off a little bit and we say, oh, I'm depressed, I'm blue. No, actually, you're just having a moment of rest, of quiet, of recovery, whatever all that is. And sometimes it's a red flag. It's waving at us saying, hey, you might not be doing what you love. You're not expressing something that's really important about yourself. Depression is our expression turned inward or blocked off. Our inability to express the truth of who we are. Not just verbally express it, but express it in life. To give our gift and be who we are. And so when we feel these things, it's telling us something, it's meaningful. So, and what we call them negative because they don't feel very good, do they? It's like taking, it's like taking that medicine when you were a kid. Didn't taste very good, but you knew it was good for you. So you took it anyway. We have become addicted to the pleasant and the nice and the bland and the mediocre and the boring. We have become addicted to that. We have forgotten what it means to dig deep within ourselves and to work with things that are challenging, that maybe don't feel so great, but they're appropriate and they're meaningful. Now, they're meaningful in two different ways, these negative emotions. One, because they're telling us the truth about something that's going on and how we're responding to it. Or two, because they're lying to us. So first, let's talk about how wonderful it is that our feelings, our negative emotions are passing. Feelings are much like waves. We can't stop them from coming, but we can choose which ones to surf. And we can choose how to surf them, right? So they comes and goes. And I think one of the most challenging things is that we think that if we feel the feeling, we're never going to not feel it. We're going to get caught in it, right? If I start crying, I'm never going to stop. If I feel the grief, I'm never going to resolve it. I think we have a fear that we're going to fall into this black hole. And partly that's because we don't deal with it. So then the next layer of that feeling gets layered on top. And then it gets layered on top again, and then it gets layered on top again, and then again and again and again. And so when this gets activated, whether it's grief or anger or depression, all of this feeling comes up like a giant volcano, or we get sucked into it, and we think it has no bottom, but it does. And the more that we deal with the feelings, the more we clean and clear that out, then when we have it, a feeling or a response, do you see we have just the one layer because we've cleaned all that stuff out. So how do you do that? How do you deal with your emotions? How do you deal with your emotions? When my mother passed away, I spent months reading books. How do you do grief? I got to do the 5 stages of grief. Okay, am I angry now? Am I bargaining? What am I doing? How do you do grief? Okay, blinding flash of the obvious. Are you ready? You feel them. Hello? They're emotions. They're sensations in our bodies, right? And so that's why we use the term feelings, because we feel them. The way you do an emotion is you feel it. You allow it like a wave to crash over you because you know what? It's passing. It will come and then it will recede. And it will come and then it will recede. And when that wave is crashing over us, there's only one thing for us to do, and that is to feel it. To feel it. And as we do that, do you see, we realize that just like we can look at our thoughts and go, that's not true, that's not who I am, we can actually look at our feelings and go, wow, I feel really angry, or I have a lot of grief right now, but I know it's not the truth of who I am. It's not forever. Do you see? We can allow ourselves to be present. We can surf the waves. Now, the other thing we can do is we can decide which waves to surf. Because not all of our feelings are telling us the truth. I hate that part. Right? And just like we say, oh, can't stop thinking about it because we haven't disciplined our minds, we also say, well, but I feel it, therefore, it must be true. Right? Okay, well, many of you know I've recently gotten married, which is a pretty amazing thing, to this amazing woman, and life is great, obviously, except for when it's not. And so I can't tell you how many times recently I've said to Karen, okay, will you stop being mad at me? Why are you mad at me? And she'd be like, what are you talking about? I am not mad at you. And so then we talk. And what happens each and every time? Oh, right. I simply assume everything's my fault. So every time that I have the emotional response, you're mad at me, so I'm going to get mad back. And I say, why are you mad at me? I didn't do anything, blah, 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 blah. And we have an opportunity to talk. Do you see? What's being illuminated is some false belief that I have, which my personal false belief is it's always my fault. And I don't know what your personal false belief is, what gets triggered for you. And we all have more than one, but that's one of the primary ones. Do you see? So even though my feeling may be lying to me, she's actually not mad at me, which is something I'm learning. Like, this is a person who actually doesn't get mad at me, and she doesn't think I'm doing it wrong. I don't even know how to deal with that, right? Because I know that I'm doing it wrong all the time. So Esther Hicks says this in The Secret: your emotions are your guidance system to help you understand what you are thinking or believing. Do you see? So when those emotional reactions are happening, and we have the opportunity to stop and feel them and pay attention to them and explore them a little bit, it actually helps us understand what those false beliefs are that are running in the background. Because every time it's illuminated, I get to look at, oh my God, I'm still being run by the belief that it's always my fault and that I just don't do it right. Right? And so every time I get to clear that out, clean that out, I get to look at it and say, but that's not the truth. That's actually not the truth about me. It's not always my fault, and I'm really not always doing it wrong. Do you see? So even though sometimes our feelings are lying to us, that makes them no less meaningful. And so our heart, do you see, our heart, by allowing ourselves to experience the emotion without letting it completely overwhelm us, but to really experience the emotion, we can actually use this as an opportunity for our mind and our bodies and our emotions to become illuminated. To illuminate it for ourselves. What is really going on? And then you'll see our heart is at the center of this system, and its primary purpose is healing. healing the false belief, healing the old idea, healing this thought we have about the world or about ourselves or about what's going on or whatever that is, healing it into truth. And when that healing process is happening, do you see, then we're aligned, aren't we? And then we're actually operating on this vertical axis instead of bouncing back and forth on the horizontal axis. I'm joy-filled, now I'm in despair because the thing, I don't have it anymore. Oh, now I have it again. Now it's gone away, right? We're bouncing back and forth because we have thoughts about and beliefs about, well, I have it, therefore my life is happy. I don't have it, I must not deserve it. You know, nonsense, right? Pure nonsense. And so, do you see, with the work that we do, with the centering, with the heart process, is that we align ourselves to this vertical axis. I can't say that word. So, your emotions need to be as educated, our emotions need to be as educated as our intellect. Think about that. Have you ever thought about educating your emotions? It is as important to know how to feel, how to respond, and how to let life in so that it can touch you. How to feel. It's important to understand how to feel. This may seem like an oxymoron, but it is an opportunity to ask ourselves, is this an appropriate feeling given the situation, given the circumstance? First of all, if it's way out of proportion, that means we've tapped into some really old stuff that hasn't gotten cleaned out. Or it might just be a completely false response based on an old habit or belief. How to feel, and then how to respond. Right? When we say that we feel our feelings, do you realize that when we feel our feelings, that's the end of it? It's not feel our feelings and kick the dog. It's not feel our feelings and spew out all over you because you're the one I happen to be mad at. It's not feel our feelings and run away because I don't want to deal with it. It's feel our feelings. Period. Feel our feelings. And then, of course, we engage the rest of us, which gets to decide how to respond. Do I now need to have a conversation with you? Do I need to let it go? Do I need to go do, some spiritual work, some therapy? Do I just need to, and get it out, right? Do you see? And how to respond, to educate ourselves and of course they're using feelings here, and we've been defining that as emotions. And so the education process is really powerful, and we can do this. So a lot of what this book is about is teaching us how to educate our emotions. So it's called heart coherence. It's learning how to feel the wave and actually transmute it into something that we can now move in our lives from. And to especially transmute some of those habitual feelings. Like I went to a naturopath the other day. They were doing some emotional clearing. This was the other day, months ago. And my dominant emotion over and over and over again, back to like 4 generations, was overwhelm. And I thought, yeah, I've been walking around in my life in the last 3 years feeling overwhelmed. And so that's the dominant thing. But as I do the spiritual work and the emotional release and feel the feeling and do the processes, do you see, then everything comes into coherence, and that way of simply engaging shifts. We shift the sort of, Ernest Holmes calls it our thought atmosphere, right? The thought atmosphere in which we walk around in. And so we can, so rather than being your thoughts and emotions, what we want to be is the awareness behind them. We want to learn how to pay attention to them. So I want to read you out of this called Heart Intelligence. Have you ever noticed when you are emotionally upset that you have an increased tendency to say or do something you later regret? Like send that email? Ooh, don't push the send button while you're upset. That's because feelings like anxiety, worry, and fear create a type of incoherence in the nervous system and brain, resulting in what's called cortical inhibition, where we are not as able to perceive the future consequences that our reactions and resulting words or actions may have in creating stress, energy drain, and time waste. In other words, we lose our ability of foresight as our higher mental functions are taken offline. A growing number of research studies have shown that we can take charge of how we respond moment to moment. We can learn to better self-regulate our thoughts and emotions, which reduce and prevent many stress-producing reactions. We can do this by learning how to intentionally shift into the state of heart coherence right in the heat of the moment. This creates alignment between the heart and brain, resulting in cortical facilitation, or heart intelligence. As we gain more skill in self-regulating our mental and emotional energy expenditures and responses, we increase our resilience and improve our health and well-being. So this is the quick coherence technique. Okay, are you ready? All right, we're going to do the quick coherence technique. Wait, nope, wrong slide. Okay, here we go. So I just want you to close your eyes for a moment. And just focus your attention in the area of your heart. Imagine your breath is flowing in and out of your heart or chest area. You might breathe a little slower and a little deeper than normal. You don't have to feel anything. Just focus your awareness on your heart. Take about 5 breaths. Now, as you have focused on your heart, make a sincere attempt to experience a regenerative feeling, such as appreciation or care for someone or something you love in your life. Maybe experiencing the feeling you have for someone you love or a pet, a special place, an accomplishment. Take a breath. So, just notice how you feel, the state of your beingness at the moment. If you're watching this at home, you could do this again. So I don't know about you, but I can feel it in the room. Everything has gone calm. All right, take a breath, open your eyes. So you have now moved into what's called heart coherence, because you have intentionally paid attention to your heart and you have decided what you were going to think about so that you could experience an emotion. Sometimes we make the mistake when we're having a negative feeling about something that we think that we have to have a positive feeling about that thing itself to make it better. And sometimes that's not true. We have anger for a reason, grief for a reason. Even when it's not for a reason, even when we really, we're really in some old idea and we're gotten caught in it, it doesn't mean we have to turn it around and say, oh, there's going to be something positive coming out of that. No, we can feel the feeling, and then we can go over here and generate appreciation, gratitude, love for something in our life, and we will instantly shift the vibrational rate. As Richard said, lift our frequency into coherence. And when we're in that place, do you see it is so much easier to respond appropriately. We are now in the awareness behind the response, the reaction, the emotions. We've moved into that awareness. And it allows us to do this thing called know yourself. Socrates said this. It's written over the oracle, the Delphic oracle. It's written over the doorway as you go in. Know yourself. Know thyself. Right? So you observe your reactions. When we're in this place of heart coherence, we get just that moment of space to observe our own reaction, to notice our self-talk. How are we talking to ourselves about whatever's going on? And how are we blaming or projecting or repeating an old idea or, telling ourselves some false belief? And then we can ask, is it true? Is it true? And we can ask, is it spiritually true? Do you see? And when we do these things, we begin to unearth the meaning behind our feelings. We begin to unearth those beliefs that we have that are operating back there, that are causing these reactions, these emotional reactions to things, so that we can begin to write a new story. And we can then just allow the wave to crash over us. And this is the image that the HeartMath people have come up with when we are moving in our lives with coherence. Lots of energy, lots of beauty. It's not that we don't have the feelings, but we actually have educated ourselves and our feelings into this coherence where they are waves of life, simply waves of life. And we can savor the ones that, I was going to say we could savor the ones that we enjoy, but if I were to tell you the deepest truth, I would tell you that I savored the grief that I felt over my mother because it told me how much I loved her. Is that weird? Do you see? I can savor my anger and my depression as much as I can savor my joy and my love and my bliss when they're clean, when they're coherent, when we keep doing this work. And then the waves of the heart, actually, it's about being alive. I posted something on Facebook. I was going to play it for you, but we're already over time. So I'm not going to play it for you. You can find it on my timeline. And it's about negative emotions and about the experience of these negative emotions and the ultimate response. It's also a spoken word artist. And he said, how else are you going to know that you're alive? Right? Really, do we really want this? Right? That's called sleeping or flatline. We're here to live life, to live it to its fullest, but for us to live it, not for it to live us, right? Not for it to crash over us and drown us, but for us to live it, to ride the waves, to ride the wave of the heart in whatever way we can. And this begins to open us up, right? If we flatten out the negative feelings, the unfortunate truth is that means we flatten out all the feelings. Can't flatten out just the negative feelings. We actually want to have a pulse. We want to be alive. We want to enjoy our life. All right. So just take a moment and go back to that place where we breathed in that beautiful gratitude. Gratitude for each other, gratitude for life, gratitude for this community, gratitude for the presence of the divine right here, right now. And we allow that to be that which we anchor into as we move into our week. We call it oh so very good. And so it is.
There's one thing that I know for sure. This stuff really works. I know that if you apply these principles and put them to use in your life will not ever be the same. It'll be more grand and glorious than you can ever imagine. How do I know that? Because thanks to people like you given to a community over 10 years ago, I got to walk in and find these spiritual principles and put them to use in my life. And now I get to share these principles with you. So I ask you to give to CSLDallas. Give to our purpose and our mission here, that we are radically inclusive, we're spiritually progressive, and we transform lives. And I know that what you heard today, when you put it to use in your life, it'll absolutely transform your life. When we're touched by this impulse of transformation and we give from that impulse comes back to us 1,000-fold. And we keep building and growing and expanding and touching the consciousness of humanity itself. And we're bringing love, purpose to this. So I invite you to go to CSLDallas.org and give. Or you can text, like I like to do. And you can do that easily by texting 972-954-4404. Set it up once, and then you text from that point on. It's easy to do. Thanks for being a part of our community. Thank you for helping us to expand our mission and purpose. And thank you for being the love impulse that humanity is awakening to in every moment.